I'm here with Congressman Khanna, who's here on behalf of the Bernie Sanders campaign. How are you feeling heading into the Iowa caucuses?
I'm feeling great. We've got so much momentum, energy, 3,000 people last night at the rally, the biggest rally in Iowa of the election season. Bernie Sanders and I are doing a Super Bowl party this afternoon. We expect a huge turnout. We're going to win here in Iowa.
I kind of get that sense too, to be honest. And, it's funny because we've been seeing the Democratic establishment, I would say, people like Hillary Clinton pushing back against Bernie Sanders, saying nobody likes him. There was a really angered response to Representative Rashida Tlaib having a negative reaction to that. But my argument is that if we're going to be punched in the face, the left is going to be punched in the face, they're going to respond. What's your kind of reaction to that?
Well, I think we got to bring people together. Look, Bernie Sanders is going to win Iowa. He's going to win New Hampshire, and he's likely going to be the nominee. So at this point, I think we have to be strategic and figure out how are we going to defeat Donald Trump. And Bernie Sanders needs to start acting like he's going to be the nominee, and that's a big responsibility. And so those of us who are working on his campaign are saying, let's now realize this is real. We're going to be winning the battle, and the big challenge is actually going to be Donald Trump. And we're frankly going to need everyone to defeat him.
Yeah, so when you look at polls, when people say, who ideologically do you align more? Bernie, right? Who do you trust more? Bernie. But then when it comes to who can defeat Donald Trump, those people will say Biden, which is kind of bizarre to me. How do you win that battle of getting people to understand that, Bernie Sanders can beat Trump, and the polls are showing that? I think there's this PTSD that some liberals have from like the Reagan era where they think the left can't win, right? How do you win that ideologically?
Well, Emma, it starts here in Iowa. I think people are going to be surprised by the results Monday and see how much Bernie Sanders is ahead of Biden. So that's going to be the first proof of electability. The second thing is look at the crowd size. I mean, I know Donald Trump talks a lot about it, and crowd size doesn't matter completely on votes, but it does mean something. And Bernie Sanders has the biggest crowds. He has the biggest energy. He has the biggest energy online. Donald Trump is not to be underestimated. He's going to have his base energized and coming out. The way we beat him is having the largest turnout ever in the history of the Democratic Party. I believe Bernie Sanders is the only person really who can ensure the biggest turnout.
And his strategy is more bringing disaffected voters into the voting population as opposed to just kind of turning out the regular types of people. So I think people are weirded out by that. But just to turn the focus to your anti-war efforts and how those align with Bernie Sanders, I really feel like we have a resurgent anti-war movement in the country right now based on what Trump has been doing with Iran, with that aggression. Can you talk about how your efforts in Congress align with Bernie Sanders's in the Senate, and how that's translated to this, I think, resurgent anti-war movement and his talk on the campaign trail?
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate your coverage of this before many mainstream people were paying attention. Bernie Sanders and I worked to stop the war in Yemen. We passed the first war powers resolution in the history of the United States, and it helped bring a peace to Hodeidah, a ceasefire, and it's helped stop American refueling of Saudi planes. And then we recently introduced legislation the day after the Soleimani strikes to say we're not going to fund a dime for an offensive war against Iran. If you look at Bernie Sanders' polls in Iowa, starting January, he was tied with the three other frontrunners. And as soon as he started making it clear that he wasn't going to get us in war in the Middle East, that he wanted to invest here in our homeland and stop these endless wars, we saw his numbers starting to rise. I believe people underestimate how significant him leading the anti-war movement is to the success of his candidacy.
And Donald Trump ran on ending the wars, and yet he vetoed that very resolution that you passed and that ended up passing the Senate. Can you talk about why your current bill that just passed a few days ago, I believe, on the War Powers Act, why maybe this time could be different?
First of all, Bernie Sanders and I had this amendment passed the House and in the defense bill 2 months ago, and it was stripped, and we didn't fight hard enough where we could have prevented this.
Stripped by some in your own party.
Stripped by some in our own party, and at the insistence of the White House. But Bernie Sanders and I called it an act of astonishing moral cowardice that we should have fought. We can't be giving the Pentagon blank checks. We can't say we're going to resist the president and then fund the wars that he wants to wage. And you're right, the president campaigned against the wars, on ending endless wars, but he's increased our troops to Afghanistan. He's increased our troops in the Middle East. He's interfered in Venezuela. He has not ended the war in Yemen. So that was a lot of campaign rhetoric. We know the rhetoric really resonated. Bernie Sanders is going to say, I'm actually going to deliver. I'm going to bring us home from Afghanistan, home from Iraq. I'm going to end the war in Yemen, and I'm going to restore our focus on healthcare, education, and infrastructure.
And lastly, I would say that Bernie Sanders is the anti-war candidate in this race. We've had other people try to take that mantle, like Tulsi Gabbard, where I think her rhetoric's been inconsistent. Can you just touch on why specifically, in addition to the other things you said, why he is that type of candidate?
Well, he has voted against every military budget that Donald Trump has put forward. He led the effort on the Yemen War Powers Resolution with me in the House. He's led the effort to stop the funding for Iran with me in the House. He talks about a world where we shouldn't have $1.8 trillion of military budgets and some of those resources going to tackle climate change. So it's not just that he has the anti-war rhetoric, it's that he has helped build the coalitions to be effective. He has the people around him to assume the presidency and establish a foreign policy based on military restraint, but building coalitions around the world to tackle climate change, to tackle global poverty, to help nuclear non-proliferation, to aid peace. I believe he's going to be a transformative president, not just domestically, but internationally. It's an opportunity that doesn't come off often in American history. We need to do everything we can to make him president.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Yeah.